our Leaders in Gaming panel. When I started the industry more than a decade ago, the CEO panel was always a headline act at every industry event I went to. In recent years, it's become slid down the agenda. It's sort of seen it slide down the agenda a little bit, which makes it a great honour today to be introducing a panel of the calibre today, which entirely justifies its restoration at business end of this year's Vox agenda. On the panel today, we have, starting from the left, we have Pontus Lindwall, who's the CEO of Betsson AB. Pontus has been with the group since 1991 and is now in his third stint as CEO, having also occupied the role from 1998 to 2011 and briefly again from July 2015 to February 2016. In the middle, we have Ulrik Bengtsson, who is CEO of William Hill. Ulrik stepped into the role on 30th September last year, having been appointed as CEO designate earlier that month. Ulrik first joined the group as Chief Digital Officer in April 2018, having previously been CEO and President of Betsson. And on the far side, I have Itai Pazner, who was appointed as 888 CEO in January 2019, after more than 17 years within 888. Itai stepped up from the COO role he had occupied since October 2017. Prior to that, he spent more than 6 years as Senior Vice President of the group's B2C division.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay. Some questions. Okay. My opening question to the panel today, so leading off from the Tom Watson keynote just now. How do you see the narrative around gaming in the core markets in which you operate today? I mean, how do businesses of your scale prepare for the unpredictable policy changes that inevitably are accompanying this narrative? I'll just start with Pontus.
Yes, I can start with saying that the past few years has been a little bit more challenging, being an operator that aims for several markets. And if we go back 10, 15 years, we didn't have to adopt to that many regulations. And now it's quite complex being licensed in many jurisdictions. And even though some jurisdictions are similar, no one is exactly the same as anyone else. So that puts a lot of pressure on the organization, brings up the costs for compliance and also, of course, even more so on IT infrastructure. And on top of that, we get the taxes. So there are several drivers for higher costs. And then we have to compete with operators who are not licensed anywhere, as we used to be 10, 15 years ago. And they operate on numerous markets without those adaptations to the regulations or without the taxes. So that's tough for us to compete with those operators. So that's the situation we have right now. And in order to cater for that, of course, we have to make the companies fit so that we can be effective in our operations. We have to be technically skillful in order to be able to prepare for new regulations and new technical requirements. So that's what we look at. But it's not as easy as it used to be 15 years ago.
Karvik. Next, Ulrik?
Yeah, that's understatement of the day, I think. It's clearly a much more complicated environment we operate in across Europe, in most countries, to be fair. UK is, of course, well documented, and the way the landscape has changed here in the last few years is quite dramatic. I do, however, think that the industry has learned a lot from the era of the FOBTs, which Mr. Watson refers to. And I think we've done a huge amount of progress in the UK as an industry in the last few years. The whistle-to-whistle ban, the voluntary whistle-to-whistle ban, has actually reduced the amount of underage people getting exposed to gambling advertising by 97%. That's real progress. The voluntary levy for treatment is also real progress. So although we have a huge amount of work still to be done, the path we're on with collaboration and some self-regulation and interpretation of the legislation, I think is proving to work reasonably well. But again, much more work to be done. And on the sort of the business side, for us, how to approach this is very much try to diversify our business to the extent as possible, to sort of, we're very UK reliant, and make sure we diversify outside the UK to balance these changes up a little bit and get a better mix in the company.
So I tend to agree with both of my colleagues here, and I think the trend is quite clear, and the UK is definitely probably at the forefront. I would call it the most proactive and progressive market in terms of regulations, in terms of the relationship between regulator and industry, in terms of the involvement that the industry has with influencing regulations, and we see that as something very positive. Many other countries are following in different ways. Some of them are basically regulating without any involvement of the industry. That creates more challenges that were mentioned here, technological challenges, compliance challenges, and we definitely believe that a dialogue between the industry and regulators is something that can help us it can help us, can help regulations, can help consumers, and I believe will create a better industry and overall experience. I do think that in terms of technology and scale, the companies and the industry will need to make quite significant changes into our infrastructure, into our technology. It needs to be much more, I would say, modern, scalable, and we have to be slightly more selective in the markets that we choose, because every market definitely comes with a significant technological cost, operational cost, and we have to choose markets more carefully than what we did in the past.
Thank you. So how important is CSR to your businesses today? How's the drive to ensure you have a more positive impact on society and necessitated changes in company strategy or structure?
So I'll start. I think CSR is extremely important for any business today. It's important for consumers when they choose companies, when they choose brands and products. It's extremely important for our employees. We see, apart from the CSR's agendas that the company leads, we see that our employees themselves have their own ideas and agendas in terms of corporate responsibilities of the organization. I think obviously in our industry, because of the sensitivity that it has to a small portion of the customers, we need to be even more conscious to CSR and invest in it. And I think any company today operating in our industry has to put a lot of thought behind it, has to expose the things that we're doing to the customers and to the employees and all the stakeholders that are involved in the business. So it's becoming more and more important, and something that we put a lot of investment in.
Thanks, Ivan. Ulrich?
Well, I think for a long period of time, CSR unfortunately has become equivalent to responsible gambling in our industry, and I wish we can get to a point where we can look more holistically as a responsible corporate citizen and be engaged in many more and broader areas. I mean, we do engage with Alzheimer's, and we pledged to raise £2 million for Alzheimer's, but again, a lot of the energy unfortunately comes down to at the moment handling regulations and responsible gambling, and at the end of the day it's also about management capacity.
Pontus?
Yeah, I think it's important for our industry to realize our situation and our starting point in terms of sustainability from a public point of view. There's an annual investigation in Sweden where they ask a lot of people about their view on sustainability for certain companies, and Betsson had ended up in the very last place a few years ago. I went to pick up that prize, which was not very amusing. But it was interesting to learn the public view of our industry. We were not alone at the end of that scale. There were a bunch of other gaming companies. And I don't really think we deserve that position because we do a lot of good stuff in the industry. But it's obvious that we have a gap in terms of communication. We haven't managed to convey to the public what we do in that respect. And I think, realizing that we end up at the bottom of that list year after year, it calls for action from the industry in that regard. Keep on doing what we do, what is good, but we need to be even better in communicating what we do.
Okay, thank you. So is responsible gaming an area that operators could potentially compete on, sort of being seen by players as providing the highest levels of player safety and protection? And if so, where do you see the potential for a competitive edge and differentiation here for an operator in 2020?
Should I start now?
Yeah, all right.
I think there is a big discrepancy between existing customers that place with us and the general public who maybe has never placed a bet or not interested in gaming and gambling. So when you do all these surveys around trust and safety on playing, most of the time that takes into account the entire ecosystem across the country. And we come out not so good. But when you talk to the actual customers who are playing with us, most of them has a big amount of trust. They do feel safe on our sites. They don't feel cheated. They know they're going to get the money. They know the mathematics are correct. They know there are measures for them to put in guardrails or safety measures when it comes to deposits and limits and so forth. So I think the customers are very well aware of what's out there and feel safe, while the general public might not be. So in terms of competitive advantage, I'm not so sure that that's an area maybe to compete on. We all do a lot already, and our customers knows that.
Okay. That's right.
I think if there's an area that we can compete on is the customer experience within responsible gaming. So treating responsible gaming as an integral part of the customer experience rather than an external interference or intervening in the customer experience. So I think the companies that will able to create an integrated experience that has, the best, obviously, game experience, but with responsible gaming measures that are incorporated within the experience in real time, using all the most advanced technologies that we use, I think can create a competitive advantage. And we see with consumers, and I completely agree with Ulrich regarding the customers who are completely irrelevant to the industry and they're not interested in our products, and obviously there's much less trust there. And the customers that actually use our services, and we see that when they do have positive experiences in terms of us intervening, speaking with them, asking them in critical points in their gaming experience, they actually appreciate it. So I think we need to learn how to do that better and in a more integrated way within their overall customer experience.
Pontus, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think you said a lot of good things in that regard. Maybe I could add that I think creating systems that are very flexible, because we have to realize that not all customers are the same, and they take different levels of customization for responsible gaming settings and things like that. And that's a little bit scary when you look at some regulators' proposals where they just propose like a fixed level for, let's say, monthly deposits. It's not, that's unreal, and that sends a bad signal actually for the whole industry to do that. We have to realize that people are different, people need different ways of protecting themselves, different levels. So I think being flexible in that regard, that could be a competitive advantage.
So I want to move on and look at how the industry is growing and developing. With a few exceptions, the years of double-digit annual growth now appear well behind the sector's scale players. Can this direction of travel be reversed? And if so, where is this new growth going to come from? Do you want to start with that, Pontus?
Yeah, obviously, I mean, Betsson has been around for many, many years, and we have experienced high growth levels for the major part of our lifetime so far. The past 2 years has been a little bit more challenging, mainly as a consequence of regulations and marketing bans and stuff like that. But our core markets right now, being Nordics and Europe, they are at a certain stage. And now we see other markets in the world. We see South America, the US coming up, even Africa. And these are markets with a huge amount of interest in sports betting. And I think we will find new soil to grow even for the next 10 years.
Okay.
I think there's still a small proportion of the global population, or the adult global population, has access to regulated online gaming. That's a process that takes time, country after country. So obviously the markets that have been active for the last 20 years, like the UK, like the Nordics, are slowing down in their growth rates, but there are several newer markets that are opening up. Obviously they're opening up under different conditions than what we had in Europe years ago. So there's still lots of growth potential in the industry, namely all the markets that Pontus mentioned, specifically the US market that's obviously growing much. It's triple-digit growth at the moment. It's more complicated, requires a lot of investment, but there's definitely a lot of room for growth in the industry.
Yeah, no, I mean, for us, obviously, the US is absolutely massive. So we're currently live in 9 states, and as Ita says, close to triple-digit growth. But I think also globally, if you look at, I think the number is somewhere between 12 and 14% of all gambling globally happens online. So only 12 to 14%, which means there's a huge amount of growth for online businesses to be had. But back to Pontus' point, you just got to make sure you're playing in the right markets, whether it's South America, US, or Africa. But there's still plenty of growth, and even in quite mature markets, as in Sweden, I think the ratio is 50% or something happens online. So there's still much growth to be had, but it's harder to capture that growth today than it was 5 years ago, no doubt.
Okay, I just want to move on to consolidation. Look at that for a few minutes. Recent years have seen a number of the sector's big players combine to gain more scale. None of you have participated to date. I'm talking about the large-scale M&A rather than the bolt-on type. Is large-scale M&A essential to continue to compete with the new behemoths, such as Stars Flutter? Or are the benefits and potential rewards of these deals, other than cost-cutting, a little bit overplayed, in your view? Who wants to start for that one?
Well, I think there's, on the highest level, there's clear benefits for scale in our industry. We have large fixed costs in technology, we have large marketing costs, and we have big costs for compliance, and scale will help you absorb those. But I think it's also safe to say that one thing is to theoretically understand that scale will make a difference. The other thing is to, in reality, be able to execute and leverage that scale and be able to sort of consolidate systems and processes and so forth. And that's probably proven more difficult than most people would have thought if you go back. But clearly there is a benefit for scale if you can capture it.
Okay. Pontus?
Yeah, I can add on to what I said first. This competitive environment that we are in, and the more complex operational environment is costly to work within, and if we can scale by acquiring other companies, that's a natural way to go. But like Ulrich said, it may sound very simple to acquire companies and just keep going. It's not that simple, because it's not only technology, different platforms, different organizations, it's also different cultures, and we have done plenty of acquisitions. Some were good and some were not as good, and because it's not easy. Looking at a market like Sweden, Sweden has 10 million people, and it's quite a well-educated market in terms of internet gaming. We have like 80 operators live there. I mean, it's a lot. And when they start to market themselves, the politicians go crazy, and most of them are running in red figures because they don't get the volumes that they need to carry their organizations. So, yeah, I'm sure with a tougher climate in this industry, I'm sure we will see a lot more consolidation.
It's right. I've obviously been involved in a few discussions there. Yes.
Yeah, I think there's not much to add to what they say. I think consolidation is inevitable in any maturing market. We can see it in almost every industry. My personal view on consolidation is that, you know, on the short term, it has short and medium term, it has very clear benefits, synergies, but it could also have a lot of disruption to the business. It can move the focus from things that we like to focus on, like our products, customer experience, to focusing on synergies, on integrating different platforms, not actually focusing on the customers themselves. So on the long term, it's beneficial. I think you have, as a relatively big organization, you can do a lot of smaller moves in consolidation, and you can get them right or wrong, and that won't be that impactful. But if you do a big consolidation move and you get it wrong, then basically you've ruined the company forever. So, and there are a lot of experiences, a lot of examples like that in our industry and in other industries where consolidation just ruined two or three very good companies. So you have one chance to get it right or wrong, and we're looking obviously to get it right.
Okay, right. Watch this space. Okay. The theme of this year's Icebox is looking to the future. Well, you could argue there hasn't been a major disruption in the online space since in play. Potential use cases of artificial intelligence and machine learning look pretty boundless. Which areas of tech do you see as being most transformative for the sector over the next few years? Who wants to take that one?
I'll start. There are a few clear areas that are a bit evolving. So live gaming in general, I think we see live casino as a very good product that's evolving and growing. I think there's room to take live experiences to other verticals, try them. AI and machine learning is something that's going to influence every industry, specifically every online company. We're heavily involved in these directions. We have quite a significant department that's dealing with developments in those areas, and basically giving customers a better personalized real-time experience through big data and machine learning. And overall, I think one of the trends that we're going to see is we're going to actually, if you look at social gaming, all kinds of social games, the customer experiences that they give is probably superior to the online gaming's experiences. It's much more integrated, so it's not sending them promotions and emails and push notifications, but everything is embedded in the customer experience, which gives a better, smoother interaction, and I think that's a direction that the industry needs to take as well.
Okay. All right. Francis?
Well, William Hill's been around for 85 years, I think, and back then we were taking bets on horses. We still take bets on horses, and I'm pretty sure that in 10 years we also take bets on horses. Same with blackjack, been around since God knows when, and it will be around. So a lot of those core services and products we provide are pretty consistent. I think when it comes to disruption, the biggest disruption we're seeing at the moment, and all technology that can support and help that, is around compliance and regulations, whether it's in a Latin American country or whether it's right here in the UK.
Yeah, I think we put a lot of, quite a big part of our efforts now goes into compliance and regulatory adaptations. But of course, we want to keep on developing the products, and I think we have seen quite a good development on the sports betting side of our business for the past few years. And I agree with Ulrik that the main offering will most likely remain the same. It sounds boring, but it's a fact. People want to play roulette, people want to play blackjack, people want to play a slot machine, people want to bet on their favorite soccer team. That's mainly that's the need that we try to serve. But what we can do better is to make those services more accessible, easier to use, and faster, and that's where we are looking as a company to make the services even more accessible and easier to understand for the customer.
Okay. As for big listed companies, being nimble enough to respond to and integrate innovation, including startups, can be quite difficult. I mean, how are you working towards becoming more open and responsive here and closing off the potential for disruptive companies to come into the market? Obviously in the States, we saw Daily Fantasy, you could argue, was a big disruptor, wasn't it? Because obviously it created the two biggest beats in US sports betting. And they didn't come out of the iGaming market, did they? So out of the traditional betting market. So how can you become more open and responsive to innovation and close out the potential for these disruptors to come in? Who wants to kick off with that one?
Thank you for that one. Great. I think the honest truth is all companies is having this conversation with themselves all the time. How can you be quicker, more nimble, get more products out quicker, make sure your technology is more fit for purpose? I think it's an ongoing conversation, I would imagine, with all of us and others as well. But I think looking a bit more long term on it, the trends in the industry is really around, currently at least, it's around product. It will always be around product, as C-Type points out. It's around compliance and regulation, and it's around scale. So the way you approach those three things in the next few years, I think is going to be really, really important. I think we all will have different ways of approaching it, but ultimately you need to look quite long term to see who got it right. I think that goes even for the fantasy guys, to be honest. It looks on the face of it good in terms of volume now, but I think you need to let this play out for the next 3, 4, 5 years. That's the time frames you sort of have to work with to be able to determine who got it right and who didn't.
So I think obviously we're internet, in essence we're all internet companies. Obviously some of us have brick and mortars, but we're all internet companies. So I think innovation is in the essence of everything that we do. I think external disruption is positive. So you mentioned fantasy sports, but in slots we just saw disruption in the form of jackpots and daily jackpots that have come into the industry, which has become very popular. Live casino several years ago. I think those are all positive moves if it comes from the outside and challenges your company, or obviously if it comes from the inside. So it's something that we have to nurture. We have to give a place. It's always challenging to give it a place in the technological roadmap when you have a lot of compliance and going into new markets that you have to enter. So leaving the capacity for innovation is always a challenge. You have to realize that you're going to get probably 9 out of 10 wrong, but the one that you get right can create a big difference, and I think that's something that needs to be maintained, and something that our employees are very passionate about, and they like to see the company innovating and not copying or doing the same thing as everyone else.
Pontus?
I agree a lot with what you said about innovation in a company and the roadmap, because at Betsson we have a lot of innovation in the organization. We have a list of things that we want to do, and it's a very long list. The problem is that it's very hard to execute and try out with the system that we're in, with all the regulatory adaptations that we will have to do. So we try now to focus on how to enable ourselves to test and release things more quickly. So that's where the bottleneck is. It's not around innovations, because we have plenty.
Okay, and we're just coming up to the end of the half-hour slot, so I'm going to throw it open to questions from the audience. Do we have any questions for our esteemed CEO panel? Yeah. Okay, we've got David's there.
In Germany, they finally have an interim regime, but it wouldn't allow online casino. You have to promise to give up online casino. And the draft permanent regime is clearly not going to allow online casino by private operators in a number of states. How are you guys going to handle that situation?
Okay, I think David's saying about how you handle particular products being left out of the mix. Is that what you're saying, David? Yeah. Okay.
Well, as I said, Germany is not.
Okay.
You're supposed to give up online casino. It's meant if you want a sports betting license. Yeah. And the permanent regime is also doubtful.
Yes, I'll try to answer if I understand the question right. So the regulations in Germany are moving, and they're moving now quite fast. I believe they aren't necessarily moving in the right direction. In terms of the current state, which is, I think, due to change in the near future, you will be able to offer specifically online slots and online casino through local casinos. So quite similar to the way that it works in the US. You have to partner with a local casino and operate online. But I think that hasn't ended, and I think regulation needs to be careful to be too restrictive on customer, because that pushes customers into the wrong directions and into the wrong hands. And I think putting extremely severe limits and restrictions on customers where there's a clear need, where the market is already used to a product, can end up, I think, in a problematic situation. But the regulation there hasn't been fully set yet, and I think there's going to be more developments in that area.
Anything to add on that?
Yeah, we are assessing the German situation right now. We haven't decided where to go yet. It's a moving situation. It changes all the time. But I agree a lot with Itai that it's very unfortunate if you create regulations which take away a product which the customers are clearly used to and which they have a preference for. The only thing that will happen, the customer will continue to play online slots, and the problem is that we may not be able to offer it as a bigger listed company active in several jurisdictions, which pushes the customers to other operators. So it's, I would say it's a stupid way to go for a regulator to do that, and it's very irresponsible.
Yeah, I think as well, and again, applying a time perspective, regardless of what happened this time around, they're going to have to come around and realize that was the wrong decision, because we've seen that in country after country after country where you restrict a product, that all you do is you feed a very, very big and wealthy black market. I think Pontus used to refer to them as the guys who flies private jets.
Yeah.
And that is an environment where the customer is not protected at all.
Okay. I've got one question down in front.
Hi, Monika Ratzek, CEO of Admiral. speaking about CSR activities and investing in good causes, how do you meet the often heard or mentioned criticism concerning whitewashing or greenwashing? Did you understand my question?
No,
Can you
I didn't.
repeat the
No?
question again?
So before you spoke about CSR activities and investing in good causes, and that this is important for your company. This is a good thing, but on the one, and that you not only should invest everything in responsible gambling, but invest in, I don't know, charitable projects or anything. So I understood it. But what do you tell people who say, okay, this is only greenwashing, you should stick to your core business, you should invest more in responsible gambling, it's not your task to invest in charitable projects, for example?
Well, I think you always have those sort of conversations, right? But and everyone is entitled to a view. But I'm a pretty big believer if, as a corporation, you do have responsibilities, and I think surely it must be better to do something, regardless of what the reason is, than to do nothing.
We try to invest mainly in things that are related to our business, like sports activities and stuff like that. So that's something which is easy to defend. But I tend to agree with Ulrik too that we shouldn't. Not only we, anyone shouldn't become criticized for helping out in whatever it is, in my view. So, but then again, that the fact that we are being criticized if we would do something like that, again, proves what kind of view the public have on the gaming companies, most likely.
Yeah, I think there's a natural tendency to cynicism around CSR coming from the gaming industry. To tell you the truth, it doesn't really matter if there is cynicism. What matters is if the companies and the employees of the companies believe in the things that we're doing. I can tell you that the vast majority of our employees believe that the things that we're doing, the intentions that we have in the areas of CSR, if it's community things, if it's donations, they come from a good and genuine place. The employees of the companies do believe in the causes that we contribute to. I think many of our customers do as well. And there always will be a level of cynicism coming from the gaming industry of whitewashing or whatever. But as long as we believe in it, and we absolutely believe in it as a management of the company, as a board of the company, we're going to continue doing that.
Okay. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Audience, round of applause for these guys. Thank you very much. Thank you, that's sponsors. Much appreciated. Good to see you again. Thanks, everyone. Great to see you. Great to meet you.